Hello, hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Reese and I talk about books. Today's video is a little casual chat about some of the books I've added to my personal library recently, specifically in this month of January. It's a nice little stack. It's kind of an accurate reflection of how I'm feeling these days. Yeah, before I pop them onto my shelf, before I catalog them and put them on there, I thought, let's chat about them. It's been a weird start to the year. Maybe you can relate to that. Um, so I haven't really been feeling like super motivated to create any videos, but this idea felt like, yeah, I can do this. I can get excited about this. And also, the way I am making this more exciting, at least for me, hopefully for you, is when I'm talking about each of these books that I recently purchased for my library, I'm going to read a couple lines from the first page because that is something that I guess a lot of people do when you're in a bookstore. I actually don't do this that frequently because, I don't know, something about reading a book that I don't own feels like I'm stealing. Weird. Don't listen to me about that. Anyways, I promise this video is more organized than I currently sound right now. I did take some notes, though it is pretty chatty and casual. Let's begin before I go way off topic again. Let's go. Beginning with Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck and translated by Michael Hoffman. This is originally written in German. Jenny Erpenbeck is a German writer, but born in the late 60s, I believe. This is the International Booker Prize winner for 2024. I read just the regular Booker Prize winner for 2024 and I really enjoyed that, so I was curious to pick this one up. It's also women in translation. I'm trying to read more in that literary bucket in general because I think it's important to hear voices that aren't as often heard, though I recognize, you know, this being a prize winner, it's probably a more popular book in that world. But anyways, I've never written anything by Erpenbeck before, but yeah, she has kind of a lot of awards. She's a writer and an opera director, which is really cool. I'm excited. This is my first work from her, and it is about two lovers against the backdrop of East Berlin, beginning in the end of the 1980s and then beyond. That's a time period and a place that I don't know a ton about. I visited Berlin before, but in like the 2010s, and so I know that there's a ton of history there, and yeah, curious to see it through the lens of this story and these characters. I feel like this has been a book club pick for a lot of random people that I follow on the internet. Like, they're not all in the same book club, I don't think, but I've seen it at least twice, which, yeah, people are talking about it. Worth a shot. Award-winning book, worth a shot. Reading the first few lines, this is from the prologue of the book. I know the story is, I think it spans a long period of time, and the prologue sounds like it's like the end of the relationship between these two characters, and so I kind of love that framing. It reminds me of the Neapolitan Quartet, which I will never stop talking about, how the beginning of that book is like, you know, in modern times, and then we go back into time to read the story. Anyways, so from Kairos. Will you come to my funeral? She looks down at her coffee cup in front of her and says nothing. "Will you come to my funeral?" he says again. "Why funeral? You're alive," she says. He asks her a third time, "Will you come to my funeral?" "Sure," she says, "I'll come to your funeral. I've got a plot with a birch tree next to it." "Nice for you," she says. 4 months later, she's in Pittsburgh when she gets news of his death. Wow, okay, right off the bat, there's some tension in this story. Yeah, it's kind of unclear. I'm skimming the page. Unclear their relationship. I was assuming that this is maybe the couple in the story, but I feel like maybe it's not, because there's some talk about dad. But anyways, yeah, I do love the way this is written. I love that dialogue exchange. I think this will be a great story to dive into when I'm in the mood for something that'll kind of engulf me and I will get lost in a world and, like I said, learn about the history of a time and a place. Next up, Still Life with Oysters and Lemon by Mark Doty. Mark Doty is a poet and a memoirist. I heard about this book through the YouTuber Bibliosophie. This was on her list of the best books she read in 2024. I really enjoy her curation of books. I always find something in her videos that I'm interested in reading, and this one stood out to me because it talks about art, and it's a work of nonfiction, a memoir. The quote that I wrote down here: "A stunning exploration of our attachment to ordinary things, how we invest objects with human store and why." This feels like it will be very meditative. I'm super intrigued by this, not just from like a learning about art perspective, but I think more like the philosophical questions that this will bring up, or why we as humans do the things we do. I hope that makes sense. This is another new to me author. I have never read anything from him before. I think he's won some awards as well. Very good memoirist from what I've read about him. So reading the first few lines. "A sharp, cracking cold day. The air of the Upper East Side full of rising plumes of smoke from furnaces and steaming laundries. Exhaust from the tailpipes of idling taxis, flapping banners, gangs of pigeons. Here on the museum steps, a flock suddenly chooses to take flight. The sound of their ascent, like no other except maybe the rush of air a gas stove makes when the oven suddenly ignites. Only with the birds that sudden suck of air is followed by a rhythmic hurry of wings that trails away almost immediately as the flock moves into the air. Their ascent echoes back from the solidity of the museum's columns and heavy doors, the wide stairway where even in the cold, people are smoking and shifting their chilly weight from side to side, eating pretzels, hunching over blue and white paper cups of coffee." That was wonderfully descriptive. I loved that. I also, fortunately, I believe I know this is the Met. I've been exactly where this is describing. I know the feeling. Yeah, I really look forward to this. It is short, but from a few other reviews I've read online, it's kind of a read that you like want to stay with. It's not something you necessarily speed through, although, you know, everybody reads differently. Now I'm just flipping through this and reading lines and bits, and I'm currently reading like 5 books right now, so I need to not start another one. I need to finish what I'm reading, and then we'll read this one. And another book about art that I added to my library in January is Now Louison by Jean Frémon. translated by Cole Swenson. I believe this is originally written in French. This is a work of fiction, but it is a portrait of the artist Louise Bourgeois, kind of like a biography. Frémon is a French gallerist and writer who worked with the artist Bourgeois in her exhibitions. Louise Bourgeois, I'm hopefully saying her name right, is one of my favorite artists, best known for her large-scale sculptures, but she was also a painter and a printmaker. She had a super prolific, long career. She died at the age of 98, and I believe she was making art like up until that time pretty much. I could be wrong about that. But she was born in France. She worked there, and then later she worked and lived and taught in the United States. Her work explores themes of domesticity, sexuality, death, and she considered her work to be kind of therapeutic, like a therapeutic process for her, and I found that really fascinating. When I first learned about her in college, I was really blown away by her story. I love that she was never really formally connected with any movement. To me, that always felt like she did her own thing, which is super cool. If you haven't heard of her, most people are familiar with her like really large sculptures that are like these spiders. I don't know if I can put a picture of them in here, but I'll link an article about her. I'll probably pick up a more traditional biography of hers at some point in the future, but for now, I'm interested in this book. I also love the cover. It's super cool. I actually don't remember how I found out about this book. I might have just been like Googling her for some reason, and it just popped up, and I thought it was like an interesting premise, especially because the author had worked with her for such a long time, so I felt like that was probably a very interesting relationship and dynamic, and that he would know things in a way that maybe a traditional biographer like would know but wouldn't interpret in the same way. I don't know. First few lines from this. You've thrown open all the windows and doors, just hoping to get a bit of air. Not a chance. Not a breath. The city is lethargic, stunned by the heat. These days, in the nice parts of town, they have air conditioning. Did you say heat? Just push a little button and the problem is solved. But where you live, it's still the good old days, and you've got to make do with what you've got. You moved heaven and earth in the attic to dig out an old fan that you knew had been there for years. Just think, it came from Choisy. You brought it over with everything else after Father's death. You took everything that was left, everything that no one else, siblings, cousins, nieces, nephews, wanted. Take whatever you want, and I'll take the rest. Okay, I think this will be good. If I'm remembering correctly, I think she had like kind of a contentious relationship with her father, and so that's interesting. I'm wildly assuming what that first page is about, but I think it could be about that. I do feel like a lot of her work deals with her relationship with her parents. I know I said I was only going to read one page of each book, but I've been flipping through this one too. It looks like it's written in like little paragraphs, which is a format that I've been enjoying lately. I believe this author's written other kind of portraits of other artists too. That's very interesting to me. I'll chat more about this once I read it. Now we're taking a giant left turn from where we just were with these next couple books. This is Endurance by Alfred Lansing. It's nonfiction. It's the story of polar explorer Ernest Shackleton's survival story in Antarctica. After his ship, the Endurance, was stuck in polar ice, and he was forced to abandon his ship, and him and his crew had to journey over 150 miles to the nearest outpost of civilization from where they were stuck. This, by the way, takes place beginning in the year 1914, if that's helpful from like a time setting perspective. And I first heard about this book from a friend of mine who loved it, recommended it to me. I put it on my TBR list, and then it came back up into my brain because a YouTuber, I think her name's Anna Wallace Johnson, I think that's her name, hopefully. She mentioned it in a best nonfiction books that she read in 2024, I believe. And then, yeah, so that reminded me of this recommendation from my friend. And then the final thing that got me to pick up a used copy of this book, I've been rewatching one of my favorite TV shows, The Terror, which is also a polar adventure survival expedition type of story, though it's the Arctic, not the Antarctic. Also based on a book, actually, so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, that's super bleak, and this story, I think, is probably super bleak as well, and that's just where my head's at. It's cold, it's dark, and yeah. So, but I love this sort of survival kind of narrative nonfiction type of vibe, and yeah, I'm pretty much very into that kind of survivalist expedition adventure story, and this should be good. Reading from the first page. The order to abandon ship was given at 5 p.m. For most of the men, however, no order was needed, because by then everybody knew that the ship was done and that it was time to give up trying to save her. There was no show of fear or even apprehension. They had fought unceasingly for 3 days, and they had lost. They accepted their defeat almost apathetically. They were simply too tired to care. That feels so like The Terror. It's not even like, oof. Yeah. If you're into this kind of like polar exploration, I can't say enough good things about that show. It's so well written and performed and shot and everything. Yeah, I think it's amazing. Currently in the US, it is on Netflix. So check it out if you are interested. And then let's talk about it, because I love it so much, and I have not read the book, The Terror. It is on my list. For some weird reason, I have yet to find that book in a used bookstore, and I just really want the experience of buying it in person. I don't know. I have some weird holdout there. But it'll come into my life one day, and I will probably talk about it one day soon. That would be a fun video, like those kind of books. More to come on that. Last book that I added to my library in the month of January is Nevil Shute's On the Beach. This is a post-apocalyptic survival story. That's what when I said the next two were a left turn, that's what I meant. It sounds very dark. It's basically about a few remaining survivors after a nuclear World War III has destroyed most of the globe. And they're hanging out in southern Australia, waiting for a radioactive cloud that's heading their way. That sounds so dark, and I can't believe that I find comfort in reading those types of things when, the world is scary. But sometimes, it's helpful. I don't know. Maybe others can relate to this. On the back of the book it says, on the beach is a remarkably convincing portrait of how ordinary people might face the most unimaginable nightmare. And I dig that. I would like to write a story about that one day. So I think this is like in my research library. This and Endurance are in my okay, file it away as research. I heard about this book from another fellow YouTuber. I believe her name is Allie. I'll link her in the description with the other channels I mentioned. And yeah, I think this was I heard one line about post-apocalyptic and submarines, and I was like, boom, we're in, because yeah, that's my algorithm cannot tell if I am a 30-something-year-old millennial woman or a 70-something man. It's what? I like to confuse the algorithm, you know what I mean? Anyways, let's read from this book. Chapter 1. Lieutenant Commander Peter Holmes of the Royal Australian Navy woke soon after dawn. He lay drowsily for a while, lulled by the warm comfort of Mary sleeping beside him, watching the first light of the Australian sun upon the cretonne curtains of their room. He knew from the sun's rays that it was about 5 o'clock. Very soon the light would wake his baby daughter Jennifer in her cot, and then they would have to get up and start doing things. No need to start before this happened. He could lie a little longer. Okay. Lieutenant Commander Peter Holmes. It's interesting, I haven't read a lot of books lately where the main character was a man, actually. Only a few in recent readings. So this will be interesting. I've definitely read a lot of women in post-apocalyptic stories, as I made a video about. This author, he's English, he's a novelist and an aeronautical engineer, so I'm curious how things will be, if there's going to be a lot of technical stuff. Probably not, though. I think of this and the Endurance, I'll probably pick up the Endurance first over this because it's cold here and I'm I feel like it will be interesting to read a book about wintry things, and then this one I'll probably read in the summer just because my brain's like that and I've got polar exploration on the brain anyways. And that's it for today. Thank you for sticking around for this chatty little video. Sorry the last two books got a little dark there. But it is winter, I guess, for me. Of these books, I would probably reach for Still Life with Oysters and Lemon first. That was the one, reading the first page or first few lines, that was the one that most excited me. Although the Now Louison is a close second. But yeah, that Still Life with Oysters and Lemons felt like it would be the most uplifting of all of these. Definitely over the last two, Thank you for sticking around for this chat. If you feel called to do so, leave me a comment, any books you are excited to read, you've picked up recently, any library holds that are coming in soon for you. I'd love to hear about them. and I will see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.